with our webinar today. But before we get started, we do have a disclaimer. This communication is not intended to provide any legal advice or opinion on any individual situation and should not be relied on to determine insurance coverage or lack thereof as relates to coronavirus. Insurance forms and endorsements vary based on insurance company, changes in addition dates, regulations, court decisions, and state jurisdiction. The information is based on review of insurance coverages, sources we deem to be reliable, and communications we have received from insurance companies and other resources. We make no representation or warranty as to the accuracy of information as applied to individual cases. As we get started today on our Ergonomics at Home webinar, I'd like to introduce you to our presenter today. Carlos Morales is Wood, Gutmann & Bogart's Director of Risk Management and Environmental Safety. He has 20+ years experience in the industry. He has been in various roles, primarily previously to joining the brokerage side as a corporate safety manager. Carlos is a certified safety professional, and he is also an OSHA outreach instructor. So without further ado, we'd like to introduce you to Carlos Morales.
Thank you, Trey, for the introduction. I appreciate that. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. This is a great opportunity to talk about a very important topic, which is ergonomics. Now, by definition, ergonomics is a study of people's efficiency at work and the work environment. It tells us that we need to fit the job to the employee. But in today's training, we want to give this a bit of a spin. We want to talk more about recommendations we have for people working at home. We all know that COVID-19 has forced us to be a little more agile and inventive, and without sacrificing those core essential ergonomic disciplines as well. So in today's presentation, I want to offer some recommendations that you as a supervisor or manager can teach your employees. And if you're an employee listening to this presentation, you can actually employ during your work hours as well. So let's begin. Our agenda today is very short. We are going to talk about 4 topics. And again, we're going to try to keep it within 30 minutes. If you have a question, please put it in the chat box and we'll do our best to answer your question. So we're going to talk about fine-tuning a work plan and why that's important. We'll go through healthy computing habits and what some of those are, and we'll provide some recommendations as well. And then we'll talk about stretching and exercising, why that's important as well, why that helps us keep our sanity. And then last but not least, we'll talk about knowing yourself and knowing what habits you need to break and what habits you need to actually bring on to make yourself more productive as well. So let's begin by talking about fine-tuning our work plan. Now, this is not a one-size-fits-all type of deal. As you can see here, we have a couple of categories that you or your employees may fit into, and we're going to go through them very briefly. So, for example, we have our segregators. Who are our segregators? Those are our folks who need to be closed out from their personal life. They need to be in an office setting and doors closed. There's no distractions. The TV's not on. The kids are in a separate room. They are working and they are in working mode in front of their computer. We then have, by definition, our integrators. Our integrators are folks who can work anywhere. They can set up their workstation in their kitchen area, in their living room. The kids are there, the pets are there. They're not distracted by any of it. They're still getting their work done. We then have, by definition, our early risers. Now, who are they? They're the folks who rise at 6 a.m. They've got a cup of coffee in their hand by 6:15, and they're responding to their first email by 6:20. We have a couple of those in our office. So we have our early risers who get most of their work done, excuse me, in the morning. Then we have our 9-to-5ers. We have our folks who get most of their work done and they spread it out throughout the day. So they do their work between 9 and 5 and they spread it out. So in the morning, they may answer email. In the afternoon, they may work on that important project their supervisor has assigned to them. And in the afternoon, they're going to go back to answer phone calls, return phone calls, maybe return a couple of emails, but they're spreading out their day. They get everything done during normal daytime hours. Now, again, I mentioned that you may be in more than one of these categories. And so as a supervisor, you have to determine where your employees fit here what plan would be best for them, and then what categories they fit in as well. As an employee, you have to look at these definitions and see where you fit in here and adjust your work at home plan as well accordingly. So let's continue by talking about prime time and why prime time is important. For most of us, prime time is morning hours, and studies will tell us that researchers show us that short-term memory tasks are performed better early in the morning. So keep that in mind. Experts also tell us that our cognitive ability achieves peak performance in the morning. So that means that we might be a little sluggish or slower to respond in the afternoon. And so we need to keep that in mind when we're planning our day. So now you may be asking yourself, so what is Carlos talking about? How does this apply to me? Well, it's applicable because, again, prolonged stress can lead to decreased performance. That's what we want to try to avoid. We want to try to make sure that an employee is following a work at home plan that works for them and works for whatever definition they fall under. If they're an segregator, an integrator, if they're an early riser, a 9-to-5er, again, put yourself in one of those categories as an employee. Supervisors, put your employees in one of those categories and come up with a good plan to make sure that you are doing the best and you're achieving maximum performance as well at work. What I do in ergo assessment, and I do a lot of these for our clients, I not only consider the physical aspect of ergonomics, but I also look at the psychological impact. So how many distractions is an employee getting during the course of a day? Do they have a talkative coworker that distracts them and keeps them from performing at peak levels? So these are things that we have to look at when we're at work, but when we're at home, it all changes. We just talked about having the TV on, maybe that's a distraction. Having the kids around may be a distraction. So again, a work at home plan should include all these factors and make sure that we consider these to make sure we achieve the highest performance possible. Moving on to healthy computing. As we can see here, we defined ergonomics earlier as fitting the job to the employee. Now, that changes with working at home, but some things are still similar. For example, we want to teach employees to keep that soft touch, keying, relaxed grip on their mouse. Want to make sure that they're not putting too much force into typing, into moving that mouse around. Avoid being in one position for too long. We want to teach them to move around. We want to make sure that they are changing body postures frequently as well, and that they're taking breaks frequently also. Mini breaks are very important, and also stretching periodically. And we'll talk a little bit more about exercise and stretching in a future slide. We also want to make sure that we're not causing too much stress to our eyes. Now, there is something called digital eye strain, and that's when you stare into a monitor for more than 60 minutes. That can cause digital eye strain. And so at the end of the day, at the end of an 8-hour shift, that will take a toll on you. And so we want to provide a recommendation. It's a very well-known rule in ergonomics called the 20-20-20 rule. And what does the 20-20-20 rule say? Well, it tells us that you take a 20-second break every 20 minutes and you stare at something 20 feet away. Now you can change that up and say, I'm going to take a 20-second break every 60 minutes and stare at something 20 feet away. So that middle 20 can change. You can say, I'm going to take a 20-second break every 90 minutes and stare at something 20 feet away. So again, these are good things to employ and to teach our employees to make sure that they're doing the best they can to avoid eye strain, digital eye strain. So let's have some fun here. Let's look at some photos that include some makeshift home office setups. And you'll see here that toilet paper has become a commodity for most of us, right? And we are doing our best as an employee to elevate our screen, which we'll talk about in a bit here, but we're using the wrong thing to do it. So we're using bath tissue to raise our laptop, and this is considered a makeshift setup. So the issue there is, again, an unstable stand-up desk, but they do sell alternates. We know there's an expense associated with it, but they do have stand-up desk units that can be purchased as well. Or you can use a sturdier elevating riser, which is a desk or a small table, which will rise or raise that monitor to the correct height. We see in our next photo there is there's an ironing board that's being utilized to achieve the right height. Someone's probably standing while they're working, and they're using their ironing board. Now, why is this an issue? Well, an ironing board, although I got to give this person kudos for using an ironing board, it's not engineered to hold weight or the weight of a computer for a prolonged period of time. So this could collapse after a 6-hour shift, and then we have an injury in our hands, right? So we want to avoid things like this that are not engineered or designed for that, and use them for that, for the purpose that we're designed for. Now, working outside is a great idea. In theory, this is a great idea. Weather permitting, I mean, we should work outside. It's a great thing to do, but setting up your laptop on top of a trash can is probably not a good idea. Again, the work area is not conducive to a work environment, and you will not achieve neutral body posture or natural body alignment working this way. So we'll talk about neutral body and natural alignment in a minute here, which is actually the next slide. So let's get right into this. If we look at this photo and we notice the employee is working from his kitchen area, he's got his coffee in hand, he's ready to go, but he's not in the natural alignment of his body. He's not sitting correctly. Now, this may be okay for about 60 minutes, you know, maybe even 90 minutes if he's in great shape, but it will take a toll on his body if he sits this way for more than 2 hours, if he does it for 4 hours, 6 hours. This is where employees begin to experience back pain. And so we want to make sure that they're sitting upright and they're not looking down into their screen. So again, you could use a bar stool or stool to sit and do your work, but you have to make sure you are sitting upright. The computer needs to be elevated, and so that we're not looking down into it, and we need to use an external mouse and keyboard as well. We see another example of a gentleman who is working from probably a kitchen countertop, and he's leaning forward, he's resting his head on one of his hands and computing with the other. Now again, being in this position for a prolonged period of time will cause an issue. It will begin to take a toll on the person's body. Again, we never want to work for sitting on the floor, as you see in the example there either, or sitting on our bed. Now, it may be tempting to bring our laptop to our bed, but again, it's not conducive to natural body posture and also our natural body alignment. So we got to make sure we avoid that. And we got to teach employees to avoid these scenarios as well. So as we continue with neutral body postures and natural alignment, the examples we show here are the examples that employees would be faced with. So using a smartphone, for example, we have an employee who's looking down into the smartphone, looking down into the screen. The same thing with the tablet and the laptop as well. That is the biggest thing. Again, cervical area, that neck area will experience some pain. Eventually, it would take a toll on the person that's sitting in this position. So we want to offer the recommendation, which are the slides or the photos in the figure below, which have the blue check mark. You want to make sure when you're using a smartphone that the screen is at eye level. If you're using a tablet, that it's supported by a pillow or a stand and it's achievable, also at eye level. And then when using a laptop, we also want to make sure it's either on a riser or it's elevated so that it's right at eye level and at arm's length distance as well. And the recommendation earlier that I made is that we need to use an external mouse and keyboard when using a laptop for a long period of time. Again, that will help with the natural alignment of the arm, and it will prevent future injuries as well. So let's teach our employees to make sure they bring things up to eye level and use external devices such as an external keyboard and mouse when necessary. Now we can utilize a hard surface chair or a wood chair to sit, but we want to make sure we use some type of pillow under that. Now we see the pictures on the left there, the employees are not sitting correctly. They're slouching. Well, the person on top is slouching, the person at the bottom is leaning forward. You want to make sure you create that natural spine curvature and alignment as well. So you want to sit up straight. And again, remind employees to sit up straight. This is achieved by scooting back into the chair until your back is against the chair and your hips are at the bend of the chair as well. So we got to make sure that they're doing this correctly and they're not sitting back on their chair, slouching or leaning forward when using a hard chair. So the ideal chair would be an office chair. We see the example in the slide here, but we understand that not everyone's going to have an office chair at home. But ideally, this would be the correct setup for sitting for a prolonged period of time. Now, we're not going to go out and buy a bunch of chairs, and I don't expect you to do that after this webinar, but I would expect you to go back to your employees and remind them to move around. As we mentioned earlier, don't sit in one position or stand in one position for a prolonged period of time. And normally that's less than 60 minutes. So make sure that you are moving around, you're stretching, you're getting that blood flow into your muscles, that you are moving and creating a new posture as you stand if you're sitting or sit if you're standing. So as we continue with chairs, if you do have an office chair at home, hey, it's a great way to sit. As you look at the example on the left, at a 90-degree angle, that's what your legs have to create. And your feet also have to touch the ground. So you have to make sure your feet are flat on the floor and your knees and your thighs are creating that 90-degree angle that we see on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, we see that that person is not at a 90-degree angle. They probably need a footrest or to elevate their feet in order to achieve that and be flat on the floor. And again, the great thing about office chairs is that they are adjustable. You can adjust the height. You can also adjust the armrests, as you can see in this next slide here. The armrests are adjustable. And we want to make sure we keep that relaxed mode. So shoulders are not up and shrugged, but they're also down. They're actually down and relaxed. And there's no tension in that upper neck area. As you can see on the right-hand side, the person in this picture here is nice and relaxed. You know, she's adjusted her armrest or the armrest on her chair so they become an extension of her desk. And that's what I like to do. When I do an ergo assessment, if a person is utilizing a keyboard tray and it's set up correctly at their desk, you know, I normally like to set that up so that it's an extension of their desk. Now, at home, it may change a bit. Now, again, this is why an armrest, a chair with adjustable armrest is important, because we're able to adjust the height of those chairs depending on what desk or table we're using at home. So we got to make sure that employees understand that the chair needs to be adjusted. It's not only the height, it's also the armrest. As we look at the screen that we utilize for our computers, you know, sometimes we're utilizing the screen on our laptop. Some of us have an external screen that we use. Some of us have dual screens that we have set up. And so a good rule of thumb is to make sure the screen is at eye level, again, directly in front of the user, and then to stretch out your arm. And why don't we take a minute to do that? If you're sitting in front of your computer, take a minute to stretch your arm out and see if your monitor, if you're able to touch the monitor with the tips of your finger. If you're able to do that, then your monitor is at the right distance. This is especially important if you wear glasses. Again, your monitor should be at the correct distance so you don't have to strain your eyes. And again, back to digital eye strain, we want to make sure we reduce that. And another way we do that is by making sure the monitor is close enough to our eyes so that we're able to view our screens. So if you already did the exercise, fantastic. Teach it to your employees as well. When you have a conversation with your teams, if you're talking to them via Zoom or just a phone call, conference call, employ this and tell them, hey, let's talk about the 20-20-20 rule, which we just discussed. Let's talk about setting up your monitor correctly and do the same exercise we just did. Hey, let's stop for a minute, stretch our arm, make sure our monitor is set up correctly and it's at the right distance. Another thing to look at or to avoid when we're looking at setting up our monitor is to avoid the monitor being too low, because then we're looking down into it, as you see in figure A. If it's too high, we're looking up into the monitor. And then in figure C, you can see it's set up to the side. So it's on the right-hand side. It causes the user to twist their neck. And again, that's going to cause strain. The recommendation is that the monitor is directly in front of you and that it is at the correct height and distance as well. Let's cover or talk about the mouse and why the mouse is important as well. Now, here's another exercise we can do. If you have a mouse in front of you or next to you, try to move your mouse without twisting your wrist. Keep your wrist and your elbow straight and move the mouse from your elbow. So let your elbow do the movement. Keep your arm completely straight in the neutral position, and then try that exercise. See if you're able to do that. It may take some getting used to, but guess what? It's going to reduce some of that stress and that wrist as well. So teach your employees this as well, and make sure that they're employing this to make sure they're employing those neutral body postures and natural alignment as well. Another recommendation is to switch the mouse to an alternate hand. So if you're right-handed and you mouse with your right hand, switch it to your left hand. I did that a couple of months ago, and it's helped drastically with my stress level. I actually am right-handed, and I taught myself to use my mouse with my left hand. It took a little getting used to, but you know what? It actually helped at the end of the day. There was less stress for me in my wrist. So practice that, teach it to your employees. It's a great way to reduce the stress level in your elbow and your wrist. Again, teach them to move their mouse from their elbow. Now, laptops. We have employees who've been assigned a laptop to work from home, but there are some rules we need to follow with laptops. And I've already mentioned some of these, which they include sitting in a comfortable chair, making sure the laptop is at the right height, positioning your screen as if it was a desktop monitor. So again, we need to achieve that correct height. It has to be at eye level and also at arm's length distance. And we also need to use a separate keyboard and mouse for the laptop. Now, laptops were designed so that we could send or shoot off a quick email, but they weren't designed for us to work on them for a prolonged period of time, which is why we make the recommendation to use an external keyboard and mouse when utilizing the laptop. Now, here's a makeshift example of what you could do to elevate your laptop to reach that correct height. Now, she could probably bring it a little closer. It's probably not at arm's length. But as you can see, she is using an external keyboard and mouse in this figure here, in this photo, which is the recommendation we would like to share with you today. So here's an example of a laptop riser. And these are an inexpensive fix to the alternate, which we just saw her using paper stacks, or stacks of paper to raise that laptop screen. The risers are not expensive. I think I saw one on Amazon for $5 the other day. So this is a great way to achieve that correct height, to make sure it's at eye level and we're not looking down or causing any neck strain as well by doing so. And then you have an Ergo keyboard that's being utilized as well. Again, an external keyboard to type and use the laptop in the neutral position as well. So let's have some fun here. Now that we've reviewed some of the neutral body postures, natural alignments, and what that entails, let's see if you can figure out what's going on or what's wrong with this picture or why they need to improve. So take 3 seconds, I'm sorry, to look at this and see if you can figure out what you would do differently. We talked about computer position, right? It needs to be directly in front of the user. We talked about using an external keyboard and mouse, and also making sure the laptop monitor or the screen is at eye level as well. So again, just review for you here. What is this gentleman doing incorrectly? Take 3 seconds to look at this picture. Again, we are looking at bad posture. He's leaning forward, looking down into the screen. He can probably do this without issue for about 60 minutes, but if he does this for 2 or 3 hours, he's going to feel discomfort in his neck area. So, and then we have lack of an external keyboard and mouse, and then the laptop needs to be raised as well. So some of the issues we need to address, we have children at home who are probably doing their homework at the kitchen table like this kid is. And so we need to pay attention to them as well, make sure that they are practicing the natural postures and natural body alignment as well. What about this one here? Take 30 seconds to look at this here. We made the recommendation earlier that working from your bed is a bad idea. Now, as you can see, she's leaning forward, looking down into her screen. Again, she's sitting on her bed, which is not a surface that will support her body correctly. So there's alignment issues as well. So don't work from your bed. One of the things that I heard from one of my colleagues was he always tells people in his Ergo classes, don't work where you sleep. It's a great recommendation. It's a great thing to tell employees. If you sleep in your bed, don't work there. So don't work where you sleep. Just remember that one. We mentioned stretching and exercising earlier, and why this is important. Actually, it's very important to us. It increases or improves body posture. It helps with our blood flow in our body as well. It creates endorphins. It improves our memory. It gives us an overall sense of well-being. So exercising is a great thing. So we got to make sure we're stretching and exercising. Now, when we stretch, we can actually provide a handout. We have a handout in one of these slides that you can print out and give to your employees and work out a plan for them as well so that they're stretching throughout the course of the day. Remind them that when they're stretching, they need to hold the stretch for a minimum of 15 seconds, maximum of 30 seconds. We would prefer the 30-second stretch, which is the best. And again, they can break it up and do different types of exercises. So let's look at some of these. There's the finger extension, which is very simple. You don't need any equipment to do it. You just stretch your hand out and stretch your fingers. You can do it with me now as we're watching this presentation. Extend your fingers. You can also do the backward stretch for your wrist as well. You hold it in one position, downward for 15 seconds, upward for another 15 seconds or 30 seconds. There's also the shoulder shrug and roll. Again, forward and backward, shoulder shrug and roll. That's a good one as well. Again, 30-second max. And that will, again, allow you to increase blood flow in your body, and your muscles will be relaxed and warmed up. Now, what do athletes do when they're getting ready for a game? They stretch. It's one of the most important things they do before they begin to play a game. So let's teach our employees to do that as well. There's also the blade pitch, which you see the gentleman doing here. He's putting his arms or his hands, I'm sorry, behind his head and stretching his blades here so that will feel very good after 30 seconds. If you're trying these, I'm sure you're feeling relaxed right now. So here's the other one. You could do the overreach exercise while you're either standing or sitting. And all you do is, you see the female doing it here in the figure. In the photo, she's stretching out. She's stretching her hands up and holding that for 30 seconds. That'll stretch your back muscles and it'll feel so relaxed when you're done. We then have the neck area. We want to try the nod head exercise. We can do the turning your head exercise, tilt head exercise. All these are great exercises for your upper neck area. And again, we can teach our employees to do these during the course of the day. Now, there's also the hands, again, behind the neck. That's a good one. You could do that sitting or standing. This gentleman is doing it while he's sitting in his chair. And there's the bend forward exercise as well. Another one you could do while you're sitting in your chair. This is a great one. Again, you decide as an employee which exercise is best for you, or as a supervisor, you can assign exercises to your employees as well. And I have a handout available that you could print out. There's actually the back bend as well. This one feels fantastic. Once you're sitting for more than 2 hours, you stand up and you do this back bend, hold it for 30 seconds. It makes you feel great. Here's the handout we're talking about. And how does this work? Well, as you can see, there's numbers assigned to it. So you can actually set up a plan for your employees and say, hey, on Mondays, we want you to do exercise 1 through 3, Tuesdays 4 through 6, Wednesdays 7 through 9, Thursdays 10 through 12, and then Friday is freebie. You can do whatever exercises you like best. And so you could actually assign these exercises to your employees to ensure that they're stretching throughout the course of the day. The recommendation is that they stretch at least twice a day, usually in the morning before they begin work, and in the afternoon after a lunch break or a coffee break before they end the day is another great way or another time to stretch as well. And there are things you can set up to remind you to stretch as well. You can remind your employees to set up an alarm on their phone or a notification on their phone, or even send themselves a calendar invite to stretch. Great way to remind yourself to stretch. Now let's talk about knowing yourself and knowing what distracts you. Now, it's probably unkind to say that our family can be a distraction, our family and friends, but if family and friends do not understand that you're working from home, then they may become a distraction. So working from home actually requires you to be dedicated to a task or performing professionally as well. So we have to make sure we work out and we fine tune our plan. We talked about fine tuning our work at home plan. And so that includes coming up with a schedule. So When do I have time for my friends and family? You know, during the course of the day, you may go for a walk during lunch hour, or you may take a break to check on your kids to make sure they're working on their homework, or you may take a break to put your child down for a nap. These are all things you need to work into your work at home plan. If you're taking frequent trips to the kitchen, it's okay, but just make sure that your choices are healthy ones. So if we're going to choose a snack to take back to our work area, let's choose a healthy snack for that matter. Allow television to be a distraction as well. I, for one, was watching CNN vigorously when this whole COVID-19 thing started, and I figured out very quickly that it was a distraction to me, so I had to turn that TV off, and I had to concentrate on my work, so I turned the TV off, and it only comes on when I want to listen to maybe the governor speak, or the president when he addresses the nation, you know, and so you time that, you put that into your schedule as well. You may have a pet or a dog that barks, and so maybe the dog is uncomfortable. Maybe, you know, with this heat wave that's happening, the dog needs to be brought in and maybe into a cooler room. So make sure you work that into your plan as well. And then you want to turn off notifications when it comes to social media and web browsing as well. You could do that on your phone, so you're not getting notified that someone just posted something new. So you're prompted to go into Facebook, into Instagram, Snapchat, and view that recent post. You can turn off notifications as well. And there's also apps and software that'll help you do that also. And then don't do housework. So you may go into the kitchen to grab a snack or to grab a cup of coffee, but don't do the dishes while you're in there. Grab your cup of coffee and go back to work. Again, this is something we want to teach employees and make sure that they are putting into their work at home plan as well. So there's some funny photos you can probably chuckle at. We have the child who's distracting her father, and then we have the employee on the right side who is ironing clothes and responding to email. So she's multitasking, but she's not concentrating on work. So again, a work at home plan is essential to making sure we stay on track. So plan your day in detail. So I'll give you an example. I have a colleague who just shared his work at home plan with me. He said, hey, I wake up at 6 a.m. and I work from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. and then my wife works from 9 a.m. to noon. Now, when he takes a break at 9 a.m., he sets his kids up to do their homework, and they're sitting at the coffee table doing their homework. He goes back to work. At that time, his wife's already working, and they all take a lunch break at noon, and maybe they take a stroll down the block and back during their lunch hour. They come back. The kids are either down for a nap, or they're doing playtime, or they're doing crafts, arts and crafts. But they're busy doing something while you're finishing up your day, responding to email, returning calls. Now, again, that may sound like a perfect plan. It may not work for you, but again, you have to determine what your work at home plan looks like and what it entails as well. Again, COVID-19 has forced us to be resourceful, to change our daily lifestyle, and so we have to adjust accordingly. We have to also make sure that we over communicate. When we're at home, our boss is not next door. We have to, if we have an issue where we can't complete a task, employees, communicate with your bosses. Supervisors, keep the lines of communication open so employees are able to communicate with you as well. And make sure that you're not being distracted with things that may postpone your deliverables as well. So if you have a duty, a task to complete, and something's distracting you, eliminate that so that you're able to reach your deadlines and deliver your tasks as well in time. So make sure that, again, you come up with rituals. There's people that have rituals. For example, I know a guy who has a certain coffee mug, and he only drinks his coffee in that mug in the morning because that puts him in a professional mindset. I know a guy who gets dressed up for work in the morning. He's actually putting on pants and a nice shirt, and he's getting in front of his computer. That puts him in a professional mindset. It physically tells him he's going to work. I know another person who misses their commute. I know it sounds crazy, right? Nobody wants to be stuck in traffic, but what he does is he takes a walk down the block and back. And when he gets back home after taking that 20-minute, 15-minute walk, he's actually in work mode. He's back to work. He's in front of his computer. He knows he needs to respond to email and deliver things to his boss. So he's back in that work mode, and that helps him. Again, a ritual that may or may not work for you, but these are examples of what things people are doing in these times and changing times, right? So you come up with your own work plan, come up with your own rituals. If you're an employee, share those with your supervisor. If you're a supervisor, ask your employee if they have a work at home plan, and if they fine-tuned it. Make sure you keep those lines of communication open as well. That is crucial. And it's also important to making sure that we stay on track. So with that, I'm going to open it up to see if we have any chat questions, and to see if you would like to
Yes,
ask us a
Carlos,
question.
there's some nice comments here, and then there's one question I see here. Will you share the recording of this webinar? And the answer to that is yes. We will be sharing a recording of this webinar on our COVID-19 landing page on our website. We will notify all participants of this webinar when that will be available, and you can click on the link and view the recording as well as a copy of the slide deck. You can also refer to the handout section here on the webinar. If you click on the handouts tab, then you can actually get a copy of this PowerPoint presentation as well in the handouts section. At this time, that's all the questions we have. And from Wood, Gutmann, and Bogart, we'd like to thank everyone for joining today. And please do not hesitate to reach out to Carlos if you have any questions in regards to ergonomics. This presentation is useful for at home, but it's also useful for at your office environment as well as you return to work. And again, reach out to Carlos if you have any questions. Reach out to your broker at Wood, Gutmann, and Bogart. And thanks again for joining. Have a great day.
Thank you.